When you've explored a few SharePoint sites, you've probably seen that many of them seem to share the same components. They often have things like a calendar, they often have task lists and document libraries. And that's really because you make SharePoint sites not by making individual web pages, but almost like putting together these self-contained building blocks, these components, these lists and libraries. You put them together one way, you'd get a team site. Put them together another way, you'd get what's called a document workspace or a meeting workspace, or put together your own combination to make a unique site of your own construction. And once you learn the available lists and libraries in SharePoint, the available building blocks, you can make some very useful sites as easy as putting a few blocks together. Now, adding lists and libraries to an existing site can all be done through the Site Actions menu on the web browser. We can do it using SharePoint Designer 2, as we'll see later, but the end result is identical. I tend to stay in the web browser for the things I can easily do in the web browser. The best way to get to all of the lists and libraries is to come down to the Site Actions More Options section here. Click that. And it will show me all the different things that I can do with this site. I can even filter them down to the different kind of libraries I can add to this site, the different kind of lists I can add to this site. Yours may look a little different from mine depending on how you have SharePoint installed and what features you have activated. But in a typical SharePoint site, you have these building blocks, these lists and libraries. And the website and its pages are generated around these building blocks, whatever lists and libraries you've chosen. And what that means as a designer is that you don't have as much control over individual web pages as you might first think, because many of them are generated. So I was on a simple team site here, and I'm going to add a new list to this site. I'm going to add a place to store useful contacts. In fact, I'll select that contacts list and call it Useful Contacts. Click the Create button. It is now a new building block of this site. But what SharePoint is going to do is automatically generate the page to, say, add a new item to that list, allowing me to fill in all the data here. It would generate the page to allow me to edit an item on that list. It will generate the page to allow me to view the settings of this list, all done automatically. If instead I decide to add a new document library, which I can do directly from the Site Actions menu here by selecting New Document Library, though I could also still do it through the More Options part of the menu. It's under the Library settings here. It's going to do the same thing. It'll generate the page to view that library, generate the page to upload a document to the library, to edit the library settings, and so on. Now, if you haven't spent a lot of time in SharePoint and you're wondering, well, I hear these terms lists and libraries, is there a big difference between a list and a library? Well, the answer is no, there really isn't. In fact, everything in SharePoint is really a list. We have the basic lists like lists of announcements, a list of calendar entries, a list of contacts. But when we start talking about libraries, well, really, a document library is simply a list of documents. We've got a picture library that's a list of images, a wiki page library that's a list of web pages. It's just a way to keep these things contained, to keep them together. Now, on the other hand, if you're wondering, can I just ignore all of this stuff and just create some web pages in SharePoint? Well, kind of, but even then you're still using these lists and libraries. If I'm, say, on this team site and I use the Site Actions menu here and come down to add a new page, the first thing it's going to tell me is that this page will be created in the Site Pages library. And even if I've created the simplest possible SharePoint site, and a few minutes ago I made a new site using what's called the blank site template, that doesn't mean there's nothing there. A blank site in SharePoint still provides all this scaffolding, this plumbing, this framework for building out this site in SharePoint. As soon as it's created, all the menu options are there. I have the quick launch bar, I have the settings, I have the top link bar. I can use the all site content link to see that in this particular site, I have no lists, I have no libraries, but I still have the page that's going to tell me where these are once I start to make them. And even if on this blank site, I said all I want is to create a new web page, I could go to my More Options, ignore the lists and libraries and say, no, I want to jump straight to creating a web page. Select this page option here, give it a name such as test, and click Create. And what it's going to tell me is in order to do this, there must be a page library and a site assets library. And would I like to create those document libraries now? You see, the lists and libraries are really what SharePoint is all about. The built-in site templates for making sites in SharePoint are really nothing more than a pre-written arrangement of lists and libraries. And the great thing is there's a terrific benefit from this, because we don't have to worry about how to work with all the possible different kinds of SharePoint sites. We just have to know how to work with the building blocks of SharePoint.